Alright, so we're going to do some leak busting today using DriveHUD, and I have a small sample here of about 5.1K cache hands, and this is going to be a cache game leak analysis. You can use this video as a general guide. I'm going to just break down some of the main stats you want to look at. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm going to do a later video and get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty, but this is a good overall look that you can just do yourself. It's really simple. The way DriveHUD is set up is so that you can do this kind of analysis really quick. So we're going to look at some stats first, and then we're going to run some filters that are all in the quick filter set of DriveHUD for this reason, just to kind of make leak analysis a lot easier and quicker. So my first disclaimer is, one, obviously you want larger the sample size, the better. The second thing is stats are a guideline. They're not exact. These are just indicators. If you're way out of line in one area or another, it's it can be a good guidepost to say, hey, I need to look at this or this more specifically. So that's what we use it as. You can be in the perfect statistical range for like a lot of these major stats, and still be a losing player. That's if you've, spewed a lot or made a lot of really bad calls in very specific spots. The statistical range for one or two stats may be slightly on the higher or lower side, but everything's still in the range, and you'd be a losing player. So that's possible. So even in this example, this is kind of a range of stakes that were played. So it's winning in terms of big blinds for 100, but at the larger stakes that this person played, there was a small loss. So at some of the smaller stakes that went at a higher rate, that's why the big blind per 100 is high, but the money actually, the absolute dollars is negative. So all right, so first thing overall, VPIP for VPIP overall, just generally you want between 21 and 28. If you're playing exclusively full ring, you can have it a little bit on the lower side of that and more towards 18 to 25, or even 17 to 25. So this is 30, so it's a little bit on the high side. So we know probably this person's playing a few too many hands, and again, this kind of analysis, you can play a little bit outside of the range and still be profitable just as much as you can play within the range and not be profitable. But again, these are, guideposts. So this would be something I'd flag and say, hey, maybe there's probably too many hands being played here, and that's why we, started losing some money. Preflop raise, generally want between about 17 and 25. You want to keep that as close to your VPIP as possible, so you have a tight VPIP to preflop raise ratio. That means you're not limping into a lot of pots, you're not cold calling too much. So 17 to 25, so it's 23.6. So it's on the higher side, but it's not bad. And the VPIP preflop ratio is pretty solid. It could be a little tighter. 3-bet usually want between about 6.5 and about 9.7 or 10. So 10.8 is a little bit on the high side. Again, not a huge concern, but again, it's something I would flag. And then I'm going to go back and look at some of the 3-bet filters and look at specific hands and be like, hey, was there spew here? So when I'm doing my analysis, I'm flagging 3-bet, I'm flagging VPIP so far. Those are two areas I want to look at. I'm not going to go through everything, like I said. I'm going to just go through a few more quick. Aggression percent, generally want between about 34 and 46%. So 36.9, kind of on the somewhat lower side, but within a good range. It's not bad. Aggression factor, which has always been the more traditional aggression ratio number, is at 3.2, and generally you want this between 2.5 and 4, so that's in a very solid range. So I usually use these numbers together. This, I think, aggression percent is a little bit more of a true indicator of aggression. It gives you the you can look at the differences in the FAQ or the knowledge base about how these are calculated, but This gives a better indication on times when you check versus aggression factor. And I don't have the formula in front of me, so I'm not even going to try and quote it, but in general, I've seen this seem to be a little bit more accurate in terms of someone's real reflective aggression. Flop C bet between about 57-68% is good, so 66.4, it's on the higher end, but that's solid. 4 bet range at 1.4. Generally, you want between about 2.5 and 5, so it's kind of on the lower side. There's not a lot of 4-bet bluffs in here. 4-bet bluffs, depending on your stake level, I wouldn't put as an immediate as a leak if it's really low. The lower your stake level, the less important that is, but you do want to be aware if you are outside of about, I would say more like 2.6 to 5-ish, then you're going to want to look and see, hey, there's probably some 4-bets that I'm missing that are profitable plays. So unopened preflop raise from early position. Generally, we want this at about, let me go back and look at my notes now, about 14 to 20%. So at 23.1, that's a little bit on the high side. So that's another thing I would look at. I'd make a note and say, early position raises. Maybe there's some hands that could cut out that playing a little too often. The table should always dictate what hands you're playing. If you have a tighter table, you should be opening up a lot more hands. If it's a lot more loose, and obviously you need to be tightening up that early position. Middle position, an open preflop raise should generally be between about 17 and 24%. So again, that's kind of on the higher side. Those are both indicators that probably need to tighten up in both of those positions. Cutoff between about 24 and 33-ish%. So that's just outside that range. So I wouldn't make that as horrible. You can, especially you can play a pretty loose range from the cutoff at a lot of stakes, especially at some of the small stakes, micro stakes. Again, it depends on the tables you're playing. This is a smaller sample size, so it's not something I would immediately flag, but these two together indicate that probably some early position hands are being opened a little too wide. Unopened from the button should have about 46 to 58%, so at 50, that's good. We're in a solid range there. Small blind between about 32 and 45%, and it's at 26, so that's low. This could be this is one of those ones that probably takes a little while longer to normalize because of the sample size. Only about 5.1k hands. There's not going to be a ton of situations where it folds to the small blind, especially in today's games. So I wouldn't put a ton of stock on this. If you had 100,000 hands and you were way outside of this number, then I definitely would look at you need to be opening some more hands. And what else should we look at? I think I skipped it. Squeeze percent. Let's take a look at that real quick, since that's happening a lot in today's games, if I can find it. And is it not in there by default for some reason? Okay, so I can just right click here, add squeeze. Okay, you can't see it off there, but and what do we have for squeeze percent? We have 5.9 and squeeze percent here between 6 and 10. So it's right on the low side, small sample, so it's not something I'd be super concerned about. So now we flagged a few things: 3-bet Vpip, 4-bet on unopened from early and middle position. So I'm going to look at the second report here by position, and we'll load up and see what hands we have that probably, just going to look at a general overview here. There's a couple things that you want to look at. First thing is you want most of your 3-bets to be coming from in position, so from the button and cutoff, which almost is. There's kind of a high number from small blind. You generally want, you don't want a lot of cold calling from the small blind. So, as long as this number here is small and this is high, that's okay. Your cold call from the big blind is obviously going to be a lot higher, especially in today's games. A lot of min raises, 2.5 raises. People should be calling with a lot wider range. But anyways, you want most of your money to be coming from in position as well. And like I said, 3-bets, so this is generally pretty good. If you're playing a really solid game and you're mixing in a good amount of double barrels and even some 3-barrel bluffs and stuff, your main aggression should come from the button as well. But this depends a little bit on style, so it's not absolute. If you're playing to see a whole lot more flops from cutoff and button, then might be outside of the normal range, and you're trying to realize your equity more, so you're checking. These aggression numbers are going to fall a bit, so it's not a huge concern, but it kind of give you an idea of how you're playing as a whole if you see your numbers in position very passive versus very strong or very high. Like in this case, 4.2 is the highest of all the positions, so this person is applying a lot of pressure when they do have position. They're not checking in some narrow equity spots. They're continuing to bet a lot. So again, that depends on style. But those are just a couple of the main things we want to see from in position. And now we're going to look at some of those things that might be leaks and run some filters here. So first thing, we're going to look at some of these 3-bets. So we're going to go to create filter, go to our quick filters, and we're going to look at 3-bet non-premium hand, because if we're 3-betting on the high side, we kind of want to make sure that those hands that we are 3-betting with looser, because we clearly are, that we're not spewing. So click OK. Close this out. And we'll look at overall real quick. And I'm going to expand. So overall, with our 3-bets, winning a good amount, so that's probably not a huge concern, but always want to take a look at some of the 3-bet bluffs. So we're going to click on here and just remove the gauges. So here's some of the 3-bet bluffs, and you can just replay some of these. Looks like so. It's min raise, call, it's ace-4. That's pretty standard. I think you want to do that there. And you're going to have to see it on this board to try and fold out 9s, 10s, things like that, which happen and you get shoved on and fold. So that's pretty standard there. Another ace-4. This one looks like with nut flush draw. And this full ring. So squeeze from the big blind, so that looks fine. Fishy player. You have position on. C-bet there, that's standard. Probably check in position. Realize some equity, pick up a gutter, and then you get a bet. You have to either, I mean, you can't really shove here, so it's kind of a fold, and it's doubtful. This person's going to be just check calling with the queen of spades, and there's not much you could really get them off of. So I'm not going to go through all of these. There's a few. Actually, this one was a win, so I'm not going to look at that. But you get a general idea. It's pretty quick and easy. You can just look at some of the hands that are not premiums. Look at your overall win rate, if that looks good in a decent sample. You can just click on here and just look at your losing hands only or your big pots. So yeah, you can just, I would advise just looking at your biggest losing hands, and you can go through some of those and just make sure you're picking good spots. Don't be results oriented, just look at the situations. If you're unsure, you're like, well, should I have 3-bet bluffed here or whatever? This is not coming up in there. You can just export the hand, export it to whatever forum format, and ask in a popular poker forum like 2+2 or Cards Chat or something like that, or Poker Strategy. So that's that. Let's take a look at, and Vpip kind of goes hand in hand with that, but so I'm going to take a look at some of the unopened from early position and middle position. We'll look at those. So once you add a filter, one of the great and easy things about DriveHUD is you can just, if we want to remove this, we just X here, and then it'll dump that filter and reset all your stats. And so let's take a look at the unopened early position. So I'm just going to click on the position report so we can look at the early position hands. And kind of similar thing like we were just doing. So click on early position. We'll expand this up here. And this win rate's not horrible from early position. Ideally, you want to be winning from every position. Usually, most people, well, pretty much everyone loses from the small blind. Big blind, you can. Some people can win. It kind of depends, but early position is usually your lowest, of course, as far as your win rate. But just click on the net one and take a look for any patterns that you're seeing. Like I would look for if there's a lot of small pairs, for example, or suited connectors and things like that. You want to make sure that small pairs, you're opening on the right tables. A lot of today's games, you can't, 2s, 3s, and 4s are very difficult to open from. I know, again, especially full ring if you're the very first to act. On some tables you're going to have to fold those, and well, on a lot of tables nowadays, it depends on your stakes. The lower that you're playing, the more liberal that you can be. Once you get into some of the decent mid stakes, decent small stakes and some of the mid stakes and things and above, then you want to really be particular about what kind of hands. I mean, you want to mix in some small pairs, but you want to do it very cautiously. So like, again, suited connectors and things, and then you can run an additional filter. I'm not going to do right now, but you can just click create filter, and if there are specific hands that you want to look at, you could just go in the whole card section, make sure you remove so that it's showing no hands, and then select the hands that you want, and then apply that filter, and that way you could dig even deeper. And we're not going to do that on this sample, but I just want to give you an idea of what you want to do. Same thing with middle position here. Just want to take a look and see if there's any hand patterns that pop up, and make sure that we're analyzing those a little bit more. Jack 9 might be questionable on some tables, even King 10, especially full ring and stuff. So you just want to take a look. I'm not going to look at all these hands, but if I start scrolling down, I'm seeing some hands like 7-6 offsuit, 4-3, some small suited connectors, things of that nature. You just want to make sure that you're not overplaying those spots. So that's the main thing. And the other thing was 4-bet, which I was saying I'm not super concerned about, but I'll run a filter right now. I'll do that just so we can take a look. I can show you what that would look like and what you'd want to run to kind of analyze that a little bit more. So the deep question for the day is, are you missing some valuable 4-bet bluffing opportunities? And fortunately, we have the tools to figure that out. So we just click on filters, create filter. Under standard filters here, you just scroll down, and we want to look at any times hero is facing a 3-bet. So we would just uncheck all of these. And we want to add some specific hole cards. So not all. You can hold your left mouse and drag some of these. So we'll say something like this. We'll add that in. Maybe some of these. I like these sometimes to bluff with. Just because there's some blockers and what have you. Yeah, I mean, these are prime. I'll add some of these, but I wouldn't 4-bet bluff with these a ton. But we'll just look at a few of these just to start. Just click OK, and then we'll see if there's any hands that show up in this range. You're facing a 3-bet, whether it makes any sense. So the answer is yes. So what I would do, since there didn't 4-bet here, is just go through and review some of these hands and take a peek. Does this hand here make sense to 4-bet? So looks like in the big blind, under the gun open, and a min 3-bet and call, couple calls. So yeah, it could potentially be, especially against someone who's probably tight. You don't know yet. It's better just to fold there. But so again, I'm not going to go through all these, but that's essentially how you would set that up. And you want to take a peek and see, you know, are there some prime spots that you've been kind of letting go. And again, with 4-bet, especially if you're in some of the smaller stakes, it's not super important that you're within, you know, that initial range I was talking about. It's just a general guideline, but it's always good, you have a great tool here in DriveHUD to just use it and dig a little deeper and continue to look at your game. This is one of the best ways to improve. Continue to do some leak analysis and run as many filters. So one of the great tools to use is there's a lot of really good predefined quick filters that are just at your fingertips. You just go here. Again, we'll reset any of these. You click once to enable it. You click twice to do the opposite. So once is I'm looking at 3-bet premium hands is yes. I click it again. It's looking where it's no. So I'll be looking at the opposite. So it's really handy and easy to do. So you can just go through all these and say, oh, I want to see how many times I saw the flop multi-way, and just look at specific multi-way pots, or no, it was not multi-way, so it's only heads up. I just put this here, and then I'll only see that data, and so on. And another thing I highly encourage, and I've brought this up in other videos, and let me reset these filters real quick, is using the equity calculator that's built in here. It's super easy to use, and it's great because it'll generate some good automated hand ranges. You don't have to play around with it too much. You can adjust those ranges, but for the most part, it does a pretty good job in giving you a general idea. You can weight some of the hand ranges. It's a primo tool for after sessions, taking a look at some of your big questionable hands. I don't have any right here in this sample. Let me click here again. Let me take a look at the last 1,000 and resort. And I'll just bring up the equity calculator real quick so you can see. So, a spot like this where you got all in, you can say, let's take a look at this a little more in depth. Already looks at the hand and analyzes it and says, okay, this is probably your opponent's range. You can easily just cut some of these out or change it based on how you think the hand is, or change. It's not going to weight the specific hands, but you can go in and manually weight, put weighted distribution on specific hands, and then run and export any of this data. So that's super helpful in my opinion, and it makes post-session analysis, which should be your first leak busting step, very easy, very simple, very straightforward to do. There's not any other tools out there that allow you to do that quickly and easily. And then every so often do the full analysis like I was doing here, and I'm going to do some more videos where I go a lot more in depth into some of these stats and positional stats and filters and stuff. But this is kind of a intro to get you an idea of what you can do and what's possible, and I hope it was helpful, and good luck with your poker game.